Hey everyone, before we get into the video, I just wanted to mention a few things. Lately, I've been getting a lot of messages asking how you guys can support the channel. Well, I know it's lame to say, but honestly, the best way you guys can show your support is by subscribing to the videos, and then also sharing the videos with your friends. So if you like the content that's on the channel, please feel free to subscribe, but only if you want to. Alright, now let's get into it. Home. Home is a place that many people long for. A place that you feel like you belong. Some people will go their whole life looking for a place to call home. And it can actually be very disorienting and can cause a loss of identity when we feel like we don't have a home. So what does your dream home look like? Is it deep in a forest, or maybe it's on the shores of the ocean? Maybe it's just that house that's down in town that you have always admired. Some people have already found that place that they can call home, and some travel the world longing for it. So what is home? To me, it's a place where you can feel safe to dream and grow. A place that inspires you to be passionate. And for you, it might be different. Here in Utah, there are several places that people have called home. Entire towns inspired by dreams of a better life. And a lot of these towns have since been forgotten, lost to the elements and to time. I find it particularly interesting when there are towns that used to be filled with people, sometimes even thousands of people, that have seemingly been abandoned entirely. These towns hold on to those memories that have been left behind from people who once called that place home. This has sparked a very common name for these towns that have since been forgotten. I'm sure everyone has heard of these towns, but for those that haven't guessed it by now, I'll give you a little hint.
I see dead people.
There are, in fact, ghost towns scattered all over Utah. To try and make one video that covers all of them would just be unrealistic. Some of them are more popular than others, and as much as I would like to do a video that can cover all of them, I think it would be best to break it into different parts. Recently, I have been drawn to the Oquirrh Mountains, and particularly the ghost towns that are in the Oquirrh Mountains. So drawn that over the weekend recently, we decided to make our way out to visit the ghost town of Mercer, Utah. We loaded up the car and got onto the I-80 and headed past the Saltaire and Tooele to the Rush Valley area. As you get onto 73 and drive southeast towards the backside of the Oquirrh Mountains, you are greeted with the turnoff marked with a sign that reads Mercer. I'm always so excited when I get to go and visit these new places, and this wasn't any exception to that. That is until we ran into a gate. This gate blocked the way to get into the ghost town, and after some research we discovered that not only were they once again mining in Mercer, they also were not allowing visitors. As we drove out, a little sense of defeat was taken away when we saw that the town cemetery was at the mouth of the canyon. There we were able to regroup and discover that there were actually a few ghost towns close by as well. We drove over to the nearby town that didn't seem as ghost town as we were expecting, called Ophir. we discovered that not only was there a little revived town, but there was also some campsites further up the canyon. This inspired us to camp there the following weekend, and in the meantime, I began to do what I love to do best, and that is a deep dive into research. So in order to make it easier, I'm going to start at the north end of the Oquirrh Mountains and work my way south. To begin, at the foothills of the Oquirrh Mountains, there once laid the town of Coonville. Don't worry, it's actually named after a person. In the 1850s, Abraham Coon explored the canyon just below the peak and discovered water as well as great trees for building. He established a home, and several families from the Salt Lake area built up a small community. Coonville didn't have a sad fate like other ghost towns typically have in Utah. Eventually, a new town grew near Coonville called Pleasant Green. Many people were attracted to the fertile soil in the area. The knowledge of the Oquirrh Mountains being rich with minerals was actually not really a priority until the early 1900s. And eventually, the town was changing from an agricultural town to a mining town. Little remains of where Coonville was actually located, but in a way, Magna's history is intertwined with the now ghost town. Although Coonville's name isn't used anymore, Abraham Coon's name is still used as the name of Coon Canyon, as well as the road that's within the canyon. The next ghost town has literally been erased entirely. That is the Bingham Canyon copper mine. Now you may be wondering, what does this have to do with ghost towns? Well, if you zoom into this location and rewind the clock to the early 1900s, you would actually find that in this part of the canyon, there's a town, and it's called Bingham Canyon. The name Bingham originated from two brothers, Thomas and Sanford Bingham, who used to use the canyon for livestock. The material copper then became the overwhelming thing that people would mine. The town of Bingham soon popped up to accommodate the mine. In 1903, Daniel Jackling organized the Utah Copper Company that combined all of those small mining operations into one big one. This made the town population boom, reaching up to 15,000 people. The Bingham Canyon area evolved into a collection of diverse neighborhoods, and many of the different neighborhoods are actually mistaken today for being their own separate ghost towns. Very quickly, the large town of Bingham began to eat away at itself. See, the mine was continuing to grow and the edge grew closer to the town. In 1926, the mine decided to build a small town called Copperton on the flat east of the canyon. While most mining towns die because of the material drying up, Bingham was actually dying because of how successful it was becoming. Eventually, in 1971, most of the town had been completely engulfed by the mine, and this led to an 11-2 vote to disincorporate the town in 1972. In that same year, the final buildings were torn down, and Copperton can still be visited, but nothing remains of the city of Bingham Canyon. Now we'll go to the backside of the Oquirrh Mountains, Ophir, Utah. At the time that we had camped here, the most recent census listed a population of 23. In the 1960s, gold and silver lead deposits were found. The mining district was named for the biblical Ophir. Zinc was later discovered in 1911, and mining operations continued until 1959. The population actually grew to about 6,000 or so. Prior to 2016, Ophir was one of the smallest incorporated municipalities in Utah. However, after the town government could not be formed from the remaining citizens in 2016, the town was disincorporated. Ophir, although to some seems small and insignificant, It actually played a large role with the last mine that we'll talk about. Remember that gate we ran into at the beginning of the video? Well, Mercer first came into being in 1870 as a town called Lewiston. When gold was discovered in Lewiston Canyon, a small gold rush began and reached a peak in 1870. This would cause the town of Lewiston to boom to a population of 2,000. Later in the 1870s, silver boomed and silver mines were opened. Lewiston would become a ghost town by 1880. In 1879, Ari discovered cinnabar in the area. The ore contained gold as well as mercury, but it couldn't be extracted with the measures and tools that they had at the time. Later in 1890, a group of Nebraska farmers bought the Mercer mine. Mercer ore was not workable. One of the Nebraska partners had heard of this new unperfect cyanide process. So in December of 1891, they proved that the cyanide process worked. Because of the new cyanide process, it would actually start the gold rush all over again. Gold was extracted not only from the newly mined ore, but also from the tailings. Soon, there was enough people to build a new town in the old site. Mercer was the decided name. Now, a young Daniel Jackling, which is from the Bingham Canyon, if you remember, designed a structure which is actually visible in a lot of photos. In 1902, a fire that started in the business district of town burned almost the entire city to the ground. This devastated the town, but it didn't stop them. The town was rebuilt and mining resumed again. In its heyday, there was believed to be around 8,000 to 10,000 residents in Mercer. By 1916, there was only one building left in Mercer, and by 1930, it was gone. And all that can be seen is that cemetery. Now, there are many reasons why a town becomes a ghost town. In the case for these towns, it was all about mining. So where do all these people go when they've left? Many of these towns people called home for years, but for whatever reason, they left and moved on with their lives. I'm sure the memory of the places they left remain. When you visit those places, you feel an energy, but it's not from the place, it's from the people. And so this leads me back to my first question. What is home? Well, I have found for me that the most important thing you will find wherever you go is amazing people. People who are at their very core kind and loving people. We make friends and family wherever we go in the world. And so perhaps home isn't necessarily what we think it is. What makes a house a home is the people that are in it. That feeling you get when you step into a home and you feel loved or accepted by the people there. Home is not a place at all.